All right, man. MG Coverz. Thanks for coming on tonight, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. So
Absolutely.
let's talk
Uh,
about everything.
yeah, for sure, for sure. That's definitely what we want. I started following you because I was looking for like reliable information on YouTube that I could trust and information that was went into the weeds, things, getting in depth. And, what I was finding was there'd be professionals on there, but they talk professional language, and I really didn't have a fundamental understanding of some of the concepts and things of that such. And then I ran across MG Covers, and I mean, holy hell, this guy's got 100 and something videos, and seems like he's been doing this for a very long time. And you came from a very educational approach. And that was something that I was looking for as someone in my prior profession who was a trainer at the corporate level. I definitely could appreciate, the approach that you provided your content. So just tell us about a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into this, and what made you transition from your prior profession into getting into professional sports handicapping?
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate the kind words. I'll answer that first part first, I guess. But not to get too technical, but I think a lot of times people know a lot about a subject, but they have a difficult time basically teaching that subject or explaining it or making it simple where they can learn. Not that it matters, but I do have an education background, so I've always learned that if you're teaching somebody something new, you have to take something that they already know and then relate the new information to what they know, and then it makes the learning more concrete. So that's always been my premise of everything I teach. So I don't know, whatever term you want to use, dumb it down, make it simple. I mean, that's how always done it. I've done that way with math in school. I've always tried to take something that looks complex and just make it very simple. And I think that helps me in this business and also teaching it because, like you said, when people start to watch your channel, you might have somebody explain the expected value in a way that's very complex. I can explain it to where anybody can understand it. So that's really the premise of how I teach and how I think and how I cap.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, before we get too deep into the weeds, we'll get into like your professional philosophies and things of that such. We have to start this off with a little story. So tell us about your worst betting experience so far.
Whew. You talking about like maybe like a bad beat or something?
Yeah, yeah. Bad beat, worst beat.
I don't- you know that was funny. I was preparing for this other podcast that never came to fruition, and it got me thinking. I've got like real funny stories about just. Um, I mean, of course, we've had all the bad beats, but this is a more interesting story. I had a this guy was a dentist that I play golf with, so he was a professional. He knows what I do. We don't, and we were friends. We
Mhm.
weren't great friends, but we were friends. So this was the Kansas City Tampa Super Bowl when Brady was at Tampa. My line, I can't remember what I had, but I had Tampa favored via my line. And of course, they were dogs in this game.
Right.
And he was going to wager something crazy like I can't even remember what he was wagering, but it was like maybe it was like 5 grand or 10 grand. And I told him, I was like, don't do it. Like, just don't do it. And he was like, why? He was like, Kansas City is going to destroy Tampa. I was like, it looks like that and it feels like that, but you just can't. And I was just trying to explain ticket count. Like at the time, Kansas City was a heavy public team. I mean, everybody was playing KC in that Super Bowl. And then he was like, what would you do? I'd say, I would play Tampa money line. He was like, you're crazy. And I remember telling him it was so funny. We finished. He's like, "I'm still going to bet Kansas City." I was like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And of course, it was just the opposite. Tampa blew Kansas City out. I mean, it was just a massive blowout. Kansas City couldn't do anything in that game
Yeah. Yeah.
and dominate them. So it's tons of crazy stories, and I think that's what's wild about this business is so many times what you feel like, hey, this is the right thing to do. It's more times than not in our industry, it's the opposite.
Right.
And then what feels like, man, this is so easy. This team's going to destroy them, and majority of the time it doesn't work out like that.
Yeah, man, for sure. I'll
But
tell
I've
you.
had no, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I had some terrible bad beats this weekend. That was
Oh,
just like brutal. I
yeah.
mean, it's something that everybody calls it bad beats. For me, I call it unexplained house edge because
Mm,
the old saying is like, "Oh, you'll win some like that," but it's in my experience, it's not true. For example, in soccer, this literally happened Saturday. We were winning. Okay, these are three consecutive wagers. We were winning. So if you're up 1-0 in soccer, that's like a huge lead. I know
absolutely.
that's huge. There's only 2.5 goals scored average in a soccer match. We were winning both matches. We were up 1-0. Lost both of them. Didn't even draw. Lost both of them. We were winning a hockey match 3-1. A hockey game 3-1. Lost that one. So what I'm saying, we had those were three consecutive wagers. And so the premise is, well, or people will tend to say, well, you'll win something like that. But the odds of me having three consecutive wagers, probably the rest of this year where that situation was reversed, it's just
Right.
astronomically small that would happen. So that's another difficult part about our business.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'll tell you about a probably my worst beat when it comes to sports betting. So back in 2020, I remember the day, December 17th, Texas Tech playing Kansas. Like I'll never forget this because I mean it's still kind of like stays on my shoulder, man. Texas Tech was playing Kansas. Texas Tech was home. All right, college basketball. Okay,
Okay.
Texas Tech was number 21 in the country. Kansas was 12th. They just got Matt McClung that season coming from
Oh
Georgia,
wow.
right? Um, the game's tight. The game's tight. The whole entire game. Now, this was back in my really degenerate stage, and I'm just firing off parlays and things of that such. I had a $75 12-team parlay. Don't judge me on putting 75 bucks on a 12-team parlay, but I did it. Okay. I'm on the
what
last leg.
what was the potential payout?
$13,700.
That's solid.
$13,700. I'm on the last leg. 30 seconds left to go. Okay. I think his name Terrence Shannon, I believe is his name. Dagger from three. Texas Tech goes up by two. All right. No, they they go up by three. Texas Tech goes up by three. Okay. So then the next possession, Kansas takes it down. McCormick shoots a three, misses, and Mac McClung goes up for the rebound, hits the top of his head, and goes out of bounds. 14 seconds left to go in the game. All right. Kansas inbounds it, and I'm talking about typical high school getting under the basket, inbounds play, and they score. So now they're up by 1 point. 6 seconds left to go in the game. Texas Tech pushes the ball, next possession down the court, shoot the three, miss, go up for the rebound. And any other time that I'm not betting on this game, a foul would have been called. Texas Tech is making contact with the ball. No foul call. Buzzer goes off. Boom. Down the drain. Down the drain. 13-7 down the drain off 75 bucks. I was traveling for work at the time, so I was staying in the hotel.
Brutal.
I almost got kicked out because I was screaming so loud. Like it was just the worst thing in the world, man. And I would have cashed out prior to the game, but Texas Tech was a dog. So the cash out option was only like 2,500 bucks, something
Right.
crazy low like that. So I was just like, I can't leave 11 grand on the table. Just not off 75 bucks. It was meant for me to win that night. And
Yeah,
so
that's brutal. Sometimes it's just that's why I went through a stage for about a year and a half where I couldn't watch games at all that I wagered on. I've gotten better now, but I struggled there for a while for that reason.
yeah, man, it's tough.
Just that mental
Never
anguish.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, nevertheless, though, I don't fire off 12-team parlays anymore. So
But I
that
will tell you, interesting. I get a lot of questions about hedging in that situation, like what you
yes,
did.
yes.
I would have done the same, and here's why: because of the low investment. Because a
Hmm.
lot of times when you hear people actually doing legit hedge, when you're talking like upwards of like like a huge parlay, like 50 grand or
Hmm.
something like that, hedging off 20 grand or 30 grand of it, I can totally see that. But if you like all you had invested in that was 75, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. It
I
just,
would I would have done the same
yeah,
thing.
it just didn't make sense at the time. Well, hey, man, you mentioned golf, and I see, on your stories, you're always out there on the links, man. So has that always been like a recreational pastime for you, or and is there some correlation with golf and sports handicapping?
Yeah, they're both extremely difficult. I mean, it's
Right.
just they're brutal. That's like I say, like mentally, like I'm fried 24/7 mentally because they're both difficult sports to conquer. But that's probably why I'm attracted to them in a lot of ways. But I didn't start playing golf until late, like 2013,
Okay.
and then anything I get involved in, I don't I can't enjoy I can't enjoy anything in life. I just have to go like full throttle. So I mean, for me, golf, I mean, I don't know how many hours. I mean, I play every day. I
Oh,
practice
really?
probably practice an hour a day and play 9 holes. I did today, which first time I've been able to in like 3 or 4 days because we've had like freezing here, so the golf courses have been closed. But yeah, I mean, I love it, huge. But there are certain correlations, a lot of correlations between golf. Things that you think might help you in golf actually don't. And same deal in sports betting. Like you think like, hey, this will probably work, but the opposite generally works. Same a lot sometimes in golf as well.
Yeah, man. I would agree. So I've not really like put a lot of time, man hours in golf, but I certainly I've played my fair share when I lived in South Florida,
Oh
and
wow.
it's one of those things where so I'm formerly a baseball guy,
Okay.
and making that transition of the swing has been difficult for me. I want to fire my hips a lot, and it's a lot of slicing goes on. So I haven't been able to make the transition to where I can get out of the baseball swing.
That's interesting you say that because there's a parallel. I know we're getting off track slightly. The sport that translates well to golf is basketball. Ray Allen is a damn scratch golfer.
Mm,
Steph Curry scratch golfer
hmm.
because they don't it when you're shooting you have to be loose, whereas
Right.
baseball, a lot of the baseball hitters, you have a lot of tension, and it's very difficult to play golf with an extreme amount of tension. So a lot of the basketball players that transition over are really 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 good golfers. John Smoltz played on the PGA Champions Tour, even though he
Yeah.
was a baseball player, but a pitcher. Same deal.
Right.
You don't tense. You got to be loose to let the club go. So
Absolutely.
we could do
All
a
right.
whole
Well,
podcast on golf.
I know, man. I know we can. I can talk just like skill enhancement all day, man. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
my thing. Well, you mentioned in your videos that you've always had an interest in developing power rankings. What sparked the interest in power rankings, and how did they play a role in your transition into pursuing professional sports betting?
Yeah, I mean that's how I learned. Bob McCune. That's how I got started. He was like an old shark back in the day. I would say he was probably popular maybe like 70s, 80s, but he wrote a bunch of books towards the end of his career, late 80s. He wrote a total of like three. And so when I first got started, that's how I learned. And he was basically under the premise that the only way you can do this business is with a model. And so that's basically how I learned. So learn to find stats that correlate to winning, create a power ranking, which is basically a line, and then you compare that line to the sportsbook line, and if there's value, then generally that would be a play into consideration. But
Okay.
yeah, I run power rankings for I mean every sport. So I never would wager on a sport without a power ranking. Not saying that's the only way, but like the new school way, they call that bottom up, meaning like you're building a
Right.
model from the bottom up, and then you have the top down guys. Which to me, it's not really handicapping because you're not really doing the business with a model, and it doesn't really take like a lot of talent to do that. I'm not criticizing. I just look at it different. I, I
Yeah.
just I just think what I do is more difficult. It just feels like I don't know. For people that do what I do, create a power rankings, create a model. I just have more respect for those people in the betting space. Not saying you. I mean, for me, I couldn't do it without a model, but I mean,
No,
Um,
no, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I definitely wanted to I want to pick your brain on that a little later on, because that is a hot topic between sharps of like what's the better way to go, bottom up, top down. You see different people, like Spanky, and he talks about a top down approach. So I definitely want to pick your brain on your philosophy on why you feel bottom up is better. But you talked about Bob McCune, and I was trying to find some historical information on him. There's little seems like little data
I
out
know
there
it.
about him. The guy was a mystery man. I saw one thing that said he was a pro bodybuilder. I
But
don't
he was a professional bodybuilder. That's what he
Okay,
did,
okay,
and
cool. So
then
that was him.
that was him. That was him. I
Okay.
mean, he was legit ripped, cut up, and everything. And then when his bodybuilding career was over, he ended up moving to Vegas, and basically started his career of building models and being. I mean, he was highly respected in the industry, and a lot of people today believe he had something. I still use this called the deviation factor for NBA power rankings. He would absolutely slay NBA totals. And a lot of people claim to this day that how the sports books kind of create their lines is based off sort of his model and the deviation factor as well.
Okay, okay. Now I was able to find a famous quote of his that said, "There once was a better named Ted who bet with his heart and instead of his head. They found old Ted dead on top of his bed. He finally covered the spread."
Yeah, yeah. He had a bunch of. If you read his book, he had a bunch of little cheesy sayings like that. And I think what really attracted me to the like his teaching style was he always talked about how difficult the business was, and then
Mhm.
that sounded right to me because anytime somebody tells you, "Hey, this is you can make a killing in this whatever business, XYZ business, and it's really easy," nobody's going to believe that. But he talked about how difficult the business was. But I mean, it's possible you can do it, you can make money in this business, but it's difficult. And I was like, okay, that made me sort of attracted to his teaching, his philosophy, his books.
Absolutely. And in your videos, you can tell that you're really a historian when it comes to everything sports betting. Can you just give us like a brief history when it comes to like the origin of sports betting and how we got to where we are now with the uptick in legalization?
You talking about just sports betting in general?
Yeah, like I mean, what's in its inception? Like, I mean, how did it start off? You hear stories about the traditional bookie back in the day and how you had to operate, underground and things of that such.
You talking about me personally?
Oh no, in general, just the concept.
Well, I just think it's like I don't know. It almost like I've heard you hear different schools of thought. I think it's I don't know why it feels like it's harder now. I don't know why. I think there's more money coming in. I think the lines are sharper. More people are more educated now. I mean, if you back up prior to what 2019, that was when I went on. I started off with my services to the public. I mean, probably 50% less states were legalized at that point. So
Right.
I think because we're getting more public money, but I think people are learning this business and that's making the line sharper, line movement a lot sharper, and it makes it very difficult. Steve Fezzik, another sharp, just said the
Hmm.
same. He said the same exact thing because those guys back in the day, I mean, Bob McCune would talk about like huge margins in NBA totals, meaning like a 10-point margin, a 10, 15-point margin off in NBA totals from his model. And like when I was running it tonight, I mean, you're looking at like 5-point margin, 7-point margin. It's just 8-point margin. It's not the same. So you got more money coming into the business. More people are educated. So if a line's slightly off, boom, it's going to self correct quickly. And back then, those guys, you didn't have online wagering.
Right, right, and it's my understanding that we operated off the lines that were in the newspaper. So I mean,
Exactly.
they didn't change.
Yeah, everybody was originators back then. Everybody was building models because You couldn't sit in front of a computer and just look at, the lines +3, it drops to +2.5. Boom, play the dog on the money line. You couldn't do that.
Right.
So
Well,
technology's changing. I think that it has made it harder because of that. Because the lines have just you got more money, the lines more sharp. I mean, is what it is.
yeah, I would definitely agree, and especially with it just being at the fingertips of your palm there, with all the sports betting apps out there. I mean, you can quickly just make a wager now to affect the lines.
Yeah.
So I definitely would agree with that. Well, not only are you a professional sports handicapper yourself, but you're also a coach. So for the audience who is unfamiliar with the services of coaching in this industry, can you explain what that entails?
Yeah, I think it gets criticized a lot. A lot of people call it a tout. People that
Hmm.
offer their plays, but there's basically two options. What I do is I let people have access to my power rankings, which are all my lines for all sports. Um, and then I have coaching videos. So somebody could join, and this expedites the process because they could see my lines for the sports, then watch the videos and kind of put two and two together how to handicap, and that's really what the business is. And of course, like traditional handicappers, I offer my plays. If people want access to the plays, they can do that as well.
Absolutely.
But I do
One.
think, no, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I do think that separates me from and I'm not. I know people get criticized because touts, they call people like me touts that sell their plays, but I just have a hard time finding anything wrong with it. Number one, it's another income stream, and a lot of sharps will argue that I'm giving away on my edge, but
Right.
there's so much money that comes into this industry. There's no way that I'm making any impact on the line. There's just not. I mean, maybe I'm just not. There's just no way.
Right.
You know there's just not that much money coming in for me and the group that I people that subscribe to my plays. It's just because most of the people that subscribe are, they're not wagering what I'm wagering. It's generally, most people it's $100 a play or $100 per day, maybe a little bit more than that. So it's just not enough to really influence the market per se.
Right. Right. Yeah. I've been running across this topic a lot in my research, and I share the same sentiments. I just don't see how you can really persecute someone for making a business model out of this. Like, I mean, essentially you're operating what you do professionally as a business. And I don't look at it as so much selling plays. I look at it as you're getting, advisement. And because I mean, you don't tell this individual, hey, you have to put this play in, but you have an opportunity to kind of dive into my mindset. And with the power rankings, you get an opportunity to see, okay, how does he actually go in and handicap these games, and you can kind of pick up on the trends and be
Exactly.
in alignment, and so that was my thing. I being on Instagram, being on Twitter, you get the guys that they sell picks and things of that such, but that they don't give you any other information outside of that.
Yeah.
Versus
No,
you're coming from an educational standpoint where you have over 100 and something videos on YouTube. So it's like you're not just giving out plays, but you're giving out information. You're teaching someone how to fish.
yeah, it is different, no doubt. And I got one guy. He's not professional, but big shout out to David if he's watching. But he is, I mean, he does really well. But this is really cool. He creates his own models, and he basically uses mine as like cross reference. So we don't have the same
Okay.
plays, but a lot of times if we're in line, then that's kind of his cue to, his trigger point. So he wants to see what my lines are for the game. He'll compare them to his power rankings, which I mean, he's been a client 3 years, 3 years strong now. So, I mean, he still does the same thing.
Right, right. Okay, well, let's get into some sports betting 101 stuff for the rec guys. Like myself, I consider myself a high level rec guy, but I'm definitely recreational. Um, but I always like to start off with the question of, in your view, what are the essential qualities of a successful sports bettor?
Well, to do it on a professional level, I've said this before. What distinguishes somebody that's, in my opinion, a professional, somebody that can profit long term. because it takes no talent to have a winning day, a winning week, or winning month. What separates somebody that is a professional is somebody that can do this thing long term, throw up, whatever X amount of wagers, 300 wagers, and be profitable, in like a 12-month span. That's kind of how that's my distinction, made, because there's a lot of people in the industry that will talk. I just literally did this today. There was a guy I watch. I can't remember the channel. It's like a 24/7 sports betting channel, and the guy is brilliant. Like, he talking about sport, brilliant.
Decent.
He sounds brilliant. But I went and checked his record at the old monitoring service I had, and he was like in the hole big time last year. So that's what I'm saying. You'll hear a lot of people that talk about sports or
Mhm.
very knowledgeable, even about sports betting. But in my opinion, what distinguishes somebody that is a professional or not is whether they can profit in this thing long term. Because there's people that sell plays that lose every year.
Right, right. Yeah, no, no, I believe it, man. I believe it. So let me ask you this then. Well, let me back up a little bit. What are some strategies for, the person just starting off? What are some key strategies that will enhance their experience when it comes to betting? Like, what are some things that you would say, if you're a novice and you're just starting out, and to limit um as much failure as possible, what are some things that you would do?
I I think line movement. And I'll tell you this. I think that's probably that's a simple way to learn this business. And for example, you wouldn't you could, if you just showed me the lines for the games and said this is team A and team B, and you didn't even tell me the sport. I'm not saying I could win long term, but I would definitely be better than the average rec better.
Okay.
And like, for example, the Dallas Green Bay game we just had last week or the
Hmm.
week before in the playoffs, line was 7.5. So this is a very simple strategy. So Dallas was minus 7.5. And then about 30 minutes for the game, the line goes to Dallas -7. So that's what we call line moving in favor of Green Bay. So we've got sharp money moving Green Bay. So they having to make the Dallas line more favorable because they've got some sharp money on the Green Bay side. So just seeing that line go from 7+7.5 for Green Bay down to 7 triggers, okay, you know, this is an indication that Green Bay is, a based on line movement, a pretty good play. So if you just understand that aspect of line movement, and generally speaking, sharp movement is late and it's subtle. What I mean by that is, let's go to use that same example. Let's say it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That game was at say the game's at like 8 o'clock.
Right.
Line moves from 7.5 down to 7. We don't know what that is. That could be, and sometimes the book will move the line if they get just substantial money, because they don't
Hmm.
want to lower that. Say if they lower the line down to 7, they leave it there, and some sharp hammers it. So there's all kinds of adjustments they might make. Sometimes they move it during the day just because it's a lot of money coming in. They don't want to be vulnerable. So just to sign a safeguard, they might lower it and try to get it bought back at that number. So what I'm saying is, all that line movement that happens in the beginning is not as important as the last move. And that's one thing I learned from Bob McCune. The last move is the most important move. So if that line's bouncing off between 7.5, and then let's say it stays at 7.5 like it did with Dallas, and then the
Hmm.
last hour or so before the game it moves down to 7+7.5 down to 7, that would favor Green Bay. So sharp movement is subtle and it's late, meaning it's not like a big move.
Yeah, so and you talk about a lot about that in your videos, line movement, and that's something that I definitely picked up on as a client of yours. But provide me this explanation though. So you hear sharp bettors talk about getting in early to get that positive closing line value. So how does that correlate? How does sharp late movement equating to sharp movement correlate with sharps getting in early to get the best CLV possible?
Yeah, that's funny. I'm pretty negative on CLV, meaning like I'm not like a huge advocate of it. But in essence, what closing line value is, whatever the line closes at versus the line you got it at. And more times than not, this is true. If you beat closing line value, if you beat the closing line, meaning like you played it at 7.5 and it goes to 7,
Hmm.
the large majority of the time, not like 80%, 90%. And when we say majority of the time in sports betting, we're talking about enough to be profit. So 54% of the time, 55% of the time.
Okay.
So if you beat closing line more times than not, you will be profitable. However, the problem I have with telling people to play early to get the best line is this. The majority of people, like what you're saying, the majority of people are recreational bettors, meaning
Right.
majority of people don't have a desire to do this on a professional level. They just want to improve and get better. Kind of like golf in a lot of ways.
Right.
They don't want to be embarrassed. They just want to just be able to poke it around the course, have a good time, drink a few beers.
Yeah.
So the problem I have with telling people to beat the closing line, so that same situation, if you're looking at that Green Bay Dallas line and you hear, hey, I need to play early to get the best line. So you play Dallas at minus 7.5, or if you tell people as generic advice to play early to get the best line, you need to play early. What are you going to have them? What do you want them to do to handicap? Because if you're telling them play early to get the best line, what are they going to use to handicap? Because
Mm.
once they play, they can't use line movement because that's out the window.
Right.
So I just think it's really bad advice to tell recreational bettors to get the best line, play early. I don't I just don't think that's good advice. But it is true. And here's the reason why. I still have I could probably pull it up on BetStamp. I think I have 0.1% positive closing line value over like 700 wagers. And the reason is like a lot of times once I see that line move, I play it, and a lot of people play like I do. They wait late, and then that line continues to move. So in that same example, let's say it went from 7.5 to 7. I play it. It's probably not a good example because that line wouldn't move, and that's a big number to go from 7 to 6.5. But
Hmm.
hypothetically, just for this example, that line more than likely a lot of times will continue to like 6.5. So if I play it at 7, it goes to 6.5. I still have just a little bit of closing line value, and that happens a lot. And you'll see that more on the money line too. Meaning, like on a money line, say if it's minus 120, the line goes to minus 130. I play it. It ends up closing at minus 135. I play it at minus 130. So is it 120? I see it go to minus 130. I play it, and then it goes to 135. So I'd still, in that situation, would get closing line value. But I think just telling people to beat the line,
Hmm.
because I think
Blanket
if
statement.
yeah, it's just I just don't like that as generic advice for the average rec better. I understand the concept, and but generally, that would be better advice for like a sharp, because to get the best line, what you need to do is have your model ready the night before the lines come out. And there's sharps that play that way. So they're literally ready right at the time the lines are released. Oh, this line's plus 7. Oh, I got this line at I got this team at minus 1. I'll play it. So they're playing it off of the opening line, and that's why that opening line movement can be important as well.
Yeah. So, and am I right in thinking that when the line comes out and there is line movement that transpires during, throughout the duration of the gap between the time it comes out and the game, that it's the market correcting itself, or correcting the line. If it moves, it's saying that the sports books got it wrong, and the market is correcting it. Is that
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, and that's another strategy that you could do as well. You could just look at opening line and closing line, and then base your play off that. If the line opens at minus 2.5, look at the opening line, and then look at what the closing line was. And sometimes that's easy. That's easier to see,
okay? Okay.
because
Um,
now there'll be different opening lines. I use a what's called a consensus opening line from a offshore website, because the consensus line, you're able to see the move a lot better, because a sharper book, let's say a book that's not sharp, just a recreational book, say they open the line at plus 7, the sharp book might open it at plus 6. But if you look at the consensus line, it starts at +7. It might go down to +6. So
And
what
copying the sharp book,
right, exactly.
following. Okay.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. So a lot of times that's why I like looking at what's called a consensus opening line.
Okay.
It's the
Okay.
same deal. It's the same deal looking at ticket count. I don't want to see ticket count at a sharp book like Pinnacle, like Circa. I want to see a generic ticket count because that's going to tell you where the where the public is. You want a good a lot of these sports betting sites, the one I use, bookmakersreview.com, wager talk,
Hmm.
those are pretty good because they have sharp books in there, they have rec books in there, and
Hmm.
then that ticket count they use is based off the wagers of all those books. Those are good consensus sites to look at because then you get a better picture of where the public is. Where if you just looked at Circa's ticket percentage, they take a ton of sharp money. So it might not be good to gauge public and non what's who's the public team, who's the non-public team.
Gotcha. And I'm glad that you brought that up. That's something that you hear all the time. The fade the public this, public that. Can you go into detail of what you take in consideration when you see a public is sided heavily on one outcome versus the other?
Yeah, I think public basically what you're looking at is a ticket percentage. It's not amount of money. When you hear Kansas City's a public team, that means the majority of tickets, the majority of tickets that are wagered on that is on Kansas City. And more
Okay.
times than not, as a professional rec baiter, you would want to avoid the public team. But this isn't a blanket statement. But I will say this: it's more prevalent when there is a huge um, like NFL. I think there's a lot of relevance in that. Not playing the public teams, and that's kind of what I did in college football and NFL early in my career. I would just avoid. So if my model had the public team as a play, if my model had the team, whatever to win was Kansas City, and they were a public team, I would just avoid it, and it would just be a no play. So that all the wagers I placed were non-public teams. And then as I got my models better, sometimes I will be in line with the public, and sometimes not be in line with the public. But for somebody that doesn't have a model, you could just look at ticket percentage. You could look at line movement and be way ahead of the majority of the market. Meaning you could open up and do exactly what I said. Okay, Kansas City's the public team. I'm not going to play Kansas City. Okay, the line movement moved in favor of the other team. Okay, this is the perfect scenario because I have two situational angles in my favor. I'm fading the public and I have line movement in my favor. So those are two like simple strategies you could use just to get better. But that's generally the concept. But as a whole, fading the public overall, I think it depends. Sports like it doesn't really work in. I don't know. I don't want to say it. Like for example, baseball has been a real challenge for me the last couple of years. This past year we had a really good year, extremely good year, but I looked at none of that. I didn't look at line movement. I didn't look at betting count, nothing. I just based it strictly off the model because that was part of the reasons why I had struggled in the past. But baseball has gotten so difficult to handicap. I just had to not look at that and just trust the model. And then that was, because a lot of times the market's wrong, and that's a sport that's like extremely difficult to cap. But
Right.
for like baseball, for football, that takes an extreme amount of money in, I think that has a lot more relevance to fading the public.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I can imagine. In baseball, um, I mean, the Oakland A's at any day can go out and beat the Braves. I mean, it's a baseball game. I mean, it can
Oh yeah,
happen. So
there's
I don't when I'm betting baseball, I'm not looking at who's on whose side because it's a baseball game, man. I mean, it can go either way.
Yeah, there's a ton of variance in baseball, a ton of variance. But I will tell you this: this is another thing that's really helped me have a ton of success over the years. Is like finding like strong situational angles to play. And what I mean by a situational angle, like I'll give you the one for NBA and hockey. Teams playing their third game in 4 days on a back to back, all on the road. Majority of the time, that team's going to lose. So I'm not saying to play against them every time, but there might be a situation where you could play a really nice dog, say at plus 150, even maybe plus 200. They might be a team that's undervalued playing a really good team, but that really good team is fatigued because they're playing their third game in 4 days and on the back to back. Works really well for NBA and NHL. For Major League Baseball, and I learned this from my client Dave that turned me on to this stat. What's crazy about this stat I'm going to share with you, this situational angle. I hear no sharps talk about this or nobody in the baseball, but
All right, cool.
this thing made us a ton of money, saved us a ton of money. Very difficult for teams to sweep in Major League Baseball. If you go back and
Mhm.
look at it, it's rare for a team to sweep. So if we're playing the Braves, we win the first two games. I never play them. I wait till that series is complete. And so a lot of times you can find a ton of value that way simply using that strategy. So if there's a really bad team like Kansas City and they're trying to avoid a sweep, a lot of times that's a really solid play. And if you just go back and look at box scores, you'll see how strong that stat is.
Man, that makes me feel so good, man, because that's something I think about. I've said that for a long time. I mean, just knowing the game well enough, and that's where kind of, again, you've turned me on to understanding that, okay, there is a such thing as statistical properties that will, drive a stat model. But I've been, since 2016, what I would call or you would call situational handicapping. And just by, nature of understanding the sport itself, I know how hard it is to sweep, especially, I mean, even going in the depths of college baseball, it's
Oh
probably
yeah,
even harder to sweep in
same.
college baseball. A Sunday game, man, I mean, that's a Sunday to me. A Sunday and a Friday is a dog's best friend, you know. So
And
that's my experience.
it's probably in the player's head too. Meaning, like the team that's won two, they're probably that day thinking, "Man, we probably won't be able to pull off a sweep today." It's just the way it is. It's not saying it doesn't happen, but
Right.
again, we're talking about majority of the time, which is what that's all you need in sports betting: 54%, 55% to turn a profit. But yeah, just avoiding that. Don't play that team trying to sweep. Go the other direction. And man, it probably more than likely saved us a ton of money because I would never just play that angle. But
Hmm.
a lot of times when the model would have a play, I was like, they're going for a sweep. And a lot of times they would lose, and I'm like, man, that thing saved me so much money this year. That's a strong, what's crazy about it is nobody talks about it.
Interesting, man. So
I would
interesting.
almost be curious to somebody to run a model and have
Yeah.
certain parameters, meaning like, okay, I'm not going to play a team over minus 130 and just simply play sweep games, meaning like you would fade the team trying to sweep and vice versa, whatever. I would love to see somebody run numbers on that. I know it works, but I use it more like just a handicapping angle more than anything because I don't just base a play on that. But I mean,
Right.
if I'm on a team that's trying to sweep, it's I'm always avoiding them.
So
And
I kind of want to, I mean, I'm interested now. I kind of want to stay on baseball real quick.
yeah,
So let me ask you this, like baseball,
it's
the
hard as a
it,
mofo to
yeah,
handicap.
it's hard as hell, man. So with money lines being so, like, I mean, money lines can get crazy high, right? But I mean, when you got a team that's winning 60 to 70% of their games, how do you play those teams? Are you fiddling around with the run line, or, like, first 5 innings type stuff, or are you staying away from those
Yeah,
moments?
I just don't play the run lines. I don't play puck lines in NHL. I did back in the day, but now I don't. And that's funny you mentioned that percentage because I think what people fail to realize it doesn't matter. Let's just say 65%. I'd have to go back and look at the standings. I think my model I run it up to like minus 160, which would be a
Hmm.
little bit probably like 63% equivalent. So even regardless of the who it is, if it's the Braves, Dodgers, whoever, that team when they take that mound, they only have about a 60% chance of winning. So that means if you play any money line over minus 150, man, you know you're pretty much getting a bad deal on that line. And it would seem tempting to do that, but and that's where a lot of people get they don't understand why it is. So a lot of times people will see a team and like, man, look at this. This line is minus 350. It doesn't mean that they're like huge favorites. this is a real important lesson here because a lot of times people say, "Man, they're gonna this minus 350 team's gonna kill them. They got the starting pitcher advantage. They got everything." The reason the line is that way, the books set the line because they need to get money on the opposite side. So they have to make
Uh,
they could set it at minus 150. They could set it at minus 200, minus 225. Their real reason the line is that high, it's the opposite side. They're
okay.
trying to make it attractive enough where they can get some money because they know that home favorite's going to get pounded. So they got to get something on the other side. And there'll be sharps that, get it. And what'll happen a lot more times than not, games like that, I just get people. The rec better will just kill that 350 line and do stupid stuff, put it in parlays, and then when that opposite side wins, the books just make a freaking killing. And it happens more times than not because, again, even the best teams in baseball, like we just said with they're not sweeping. So if
Right.
it's a 3 game series, the good teams winning 2 out of 3. They play a 4 game
Right.
series, 3 out of 4 at best.
Absolutely.
So you have to play dogs in baseball. You have to play dogs because they win. They win 40% of the time. Same in NHL.
Fair enough. Now, let me ask you this. W- What's your thoughts on I've always been interested to know, like, as far as the prop, I like playing props in baseball. I'm a guy, I go to the games, I'll be at a game a week. So what I found last season that I had decent success and I didn't track it, we'll track it this year. First pitch strikes. Do you think that there could be a model that supports like playing first pitch strikes?
That was crazy about the people were betting those first inning games as well, like who would score or no score.
Mhm. I couldn't touch those, but
You know that you might be able to do that. I think you would probably if you went and I mean you can model anything. If you went and charted the first pitch of every pitcher and charted it, you probably could. I mean, like the guys, what he's throwing. If he's a, I don't know. I mean, I think you could. You'd probably have to have a pretty big sample size.
mm,
Like if a guy's throwing, I guess that information's available now with advanced stats. I'm sure you could see what he throws for the opening pitch, what he averages.
yeah, yeah, you can pull that stat and the percentages of pitch types and all that good
That's
stuff.
crazy. Yeah, you
Yeah.
probably could. You probably could. Meaning like the fastball guy, if he just threw a
Hmm.
heater to start it,
And
or
then they break it down. You can also see from a hitting perspective, uh, first pitch outcomes for hitters. How
yeah,
often they swing at the first pitch.
yeah, like Ron Acuna. I mean, he was always he went. His whole philosophy is to sit on the fastball. So if the guy gets up there and he's hit so many one first pitch home runs in his career. So he's just sitting on it.
Listen, people who are watching this video will be able to recall the moments that I sat there at the game and posted my bet of Ronald Acuna first pitch outcome home run. I hit that like 4 times.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, he was so good at it. And that's another thing that's changed in the what's made baseball hard. I've talked about this in previous videos. It's gotten so difficult for pitchers because if you back up to probably let me see what year it is. Even when I was playing, there was only a couple guys in the lineup that could hit a home run, even in professional major league. Back in the old days, I'm a big Braves fan, so you had Rafael Belliard leading off. The
Hmm.
leadoff guy was a guy that could make contact. He had a good slugging percentage, could get on base. The guy gets
Absolutely.
on first base. The number two guy would bunt. You get him over to second, and then you
Yeah.
had
Small
three
ball.
guy and the four guys to clean up. This is what makes baseball hard. This is what's harder for pitchers now. Every guy in the lineup can hit home run jacks, and a lot of people have adopted that strategy. What the Braves have done, you lead off with a guy that can home run. So right out the gate, the pitcher starts. He can't pitch around the first guy. He's
Mm,
got to come right after him. And so you get a guy on first base. The next guy up is not bunting. He's trying to hit a home run jack. So one mistake by that pitcher, boom, and he's hitting a home run. That's why home runs now. It's an interesting. If somebody's looking to build a model, I'll give you a secret. Home runs is something you could actually build a model off of for Major League Baseball
that's interesting. I was going to ask that question.
because
Uh,
people don't play. like the first model I created was base runners. I had a model based on the number of base runners the team would have. So the more base runners you would have, the more runs you would score. But now it's off of home run jacks. Nobody bunts in Major League Baseball. You get a runner on first, they're not bunting that guy over. Everybody coming up is trying to hit a home run jack, puts more pressure on the pitcher. So that's another stat. You could go opposite of that. The pitchers that give up home runs are the ones that's going to end up losing the game.
Right.
So the guy might be a pretty decent pitcher. He's giving up a ton of home run jacks or susceptible to home run jacks. He plays a quote good home run hitting team like the Braves were. I mean, the guy's getting destroyed.
Absolutely, man.
So that's
Absolutely.
that's kind of how I think when I'm building models. I just try to find a very simple stat, and then I'll just like, I'll run numbers to see if that works.
Is if it's contributing to wins.
Right, correlating
Right.
to winning. And
Okay.
home runs actually does. If you go back, I mean, Braves were number one team in baseball in home runs last year. I think they said,
Right.
wasn't that a major league record?
Yep. Set a record. Yep.
Yeah. So, simple things like that. It's always been sort of my philosophy, like finding one stat. In fact, I have a coaching client. We're actually, that's one of the stats we're using is home runs.
Okay. Okay. Now with a sport like baseball that's playing 162 game season, how many games is in reality do you need to get a fair glance or a lens of what that team's produce or just what all teams are producing? How many games in?
I usually start this year. I did it. I just let them go free in April and then start in May. I think that's a good. I think a lot of sharps do that. And baseball's changed over the years. Like baseball when I first started, that was around 2015. I mean, it felt easy. It really did. It felt easy. And then last year I had a ton of success, but the prior 2 years I had losing seasons. I mean, it was like got destroyed in baseball because it's just the sport changed. And so now generally I use ten games for the model, but I generally like to see a whole slate that whole month of April, just a good 30 days of inventory. And then I slowly creep into it, which is the way I did this year. I was extremely cautious. And even this year, I went in the whole 2,500 out the gate.
Mm,
And then we came back and, from that point made right around like 13 grand in baseball. So it was a really solid model, but it's still extremely
it's tough,
difficult.
man. Yeah, it's
But
really
the,
tough.
but to answer your question, I only use about, well, it depends. Usually about 10 games, 7 to 10 games is probably a good sample of games because because you'll see teams going out of form anytime like NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, sports that have long seasons, and that's another way for you to find a ton of value. And this is a very simple tip. If you look at a team that has a really good record, they're at the top of the standings, but then you look and see they've lost like 3 out of their last 5 games. That team's sort of out of form. So a lot of times that would be a good team to wager against because the marketplace will just look at that record.
Mm,
Hey, this is a good team. So it's what I call they're probably going to be overvalued in the marketplace. It's the same with Kershaw when he's on the mound. He's always overvalued, and a lot of good pitchers are that way. So if you can find sometimes you can find a pitcher that's overvalued, meaning like if it's a big name, but the guy's struggling his last 3 outings, he's been average at best. That's a lot of times a good wager because the marketplace is going to overvalue. But you look at his most recent form, his last 3 starts, and he's given up a bunch of runs, home runs. That's a good play. And then vice versa. You'll have a pitcher that might have a really bad record, but he's pitched really extremely well in his last 3 starts and he's starting to trend upwards. Maybe it's a guy to rehab or whatever, but those last 3 starts for Major League Baseball pitchers is a really good way to find a ton of value because
nice, nice.
the marketplace is going to look at that overall record.
Yeah, man, we'll have to do a baseball preview show, man.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I
In fact, I love handicapping baseball now just because of success. I'm telling you, man. Last year was the first year I felt like I really had a grasp on how to cap it. And this is what makes baseball hard. You're basically, in a lot of ways, handicapping 3 different sports. You got hitting
yep,
that can impact the game. You got pitching. Starting pitching can impact the game.
and
Relief
fielding.
pitching. Relief pitching cannot win a game for you, but they can lose a ton of games for you.
That is so true.
Oh yeah,
That is
there's
so true.
you know, you look at what
Yeah,
Washington did.
I was thinking defensively with fielding and the contributions of errors, but then in Major League Baseball, you just don't have that many errors, so I guess that wouldn't be a
I don't. I've never used fielding. Not saying that you couldn't, because there's a lot of ways to do this. But for me, those are the big three: is starting pitching, hitting, and relief pitching. And in my opinion, you have to weigh them differently because they have a different impact on the game. So,
absolutely because a team can be stacked on the starting rotation front, but then have a shitty bullpen.
oh, that you'll see that a lot. You go back
Yeah.
at the year Washington won the pennant at the All Star break. Won the World Series. I sound like an old man saying pennant. When I know, right? When Washington won the World Series, their bullpen at the All Star break was on pace to be the worst bullpen in the history of Major League Baseball. I never forget that stat because I
Wow.
was I was fading them. Everybody was playing them because they could score runs, but the bullpen was getting canned. And that's what makes that sport hard to handicap. You got to look at that starting pitcher. Is he going 4 innings? Okay, if he's going
Mm,
4 innings and you
right.
got a crap bullpen, that's gonna be a bad wager because he might be a great starting pitcher, but he's only gonna give you 4 runs. The majority of the game is gonna be determined by relief pitching. So in that
Man, that's
scenario, the relief pitching would need to weigh more,
absolutely, that's so true, man. That's so true. Yeah,
and that's
man, when a guy
what makes baseball hard.
right, right,
It's the challenge,
wow.
but it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, man, we can talk baseball all day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well so you've mentioned modeling and or originating a lot. How do you balance, like, statistical analysis with your intuitive decision making as far as, like, talk getting into the situational handicapping? And you see numbers, but then in your mind, there's other things creeping in. How do you balance that?
That's a great question. Great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Prior to probably last September, something like that, meaning like a year and a half ago, that's exactly how I would handicap. I'd have my model, look and see if I had value. If I had value in a game, then I would look at situational angles like for baseball, starting pitching. I would look at maybe like form for NBA and NHL. I would look at injuries, etc. And then after I gathered all that information, I'd make a decision. I don't handicap that way anymore. The way that I work the models, I've gone back and just about redid every model. Anything that's situationally that I find relevant, I try to take that and put that into the model itself,
Okay.
so that the model does a majority of the work. And then after that, I want to have a trigger point. And a lot of times for me, that trigger point's line movement. So that because what happens this was actually a true story. This was not this past September, but like what was that, 2022 then, I guess. I woke up that morning, I ran the model I already had the model ran for college football, but I remember sitting in front of my computer all day watching college football, handicapping games. There was a ton of games of value, but I couldn't pull the trigger. I don't know what happened that day. I didn't really have a trigger point. We went 2-1. It was a decent day. We only had 3 plays, and I worked like all day. And I was like, you know what? I got to come up with a better way. And I was doing the quote traditional way. And what I found for a lot of people, myself included, you need to have a trigger point to where and a lot. This is going back to that parallel to golf. Golfers they'll think about a shot. Okay, I got downwind. Instead of hitting a 7 iron, I'm hit an 8 iron. And the caddy's like, yeah, I agree with that. You agree with that? Okay, good. All right, let's go. Boom. And then once they go step up to the ball, they're not thinking about anything else but hitting a good shot and executing a shot. And it's the same with me. That's why I think it's really good to have a trigger point. And you could still have a trigger point with situational angles, meaning like for like hockey, for example. Let's say you have value via the model. You tell yourself, okay, I have to have 3 situational angles in my favor to make that play. So if you have value, the first situational angle, do I have a goalie advantage? Meaning my
Hmm.
goalie's better than their goalie. Okay, great.
Right.
Is the team I'm wagering on in good form? Yes, they're in good form. Do I have positive line movement? Yes. Boom. Then that's a play.
So hold
So
on.
like,
Hold on 1 second. So with that scenario in hockey, what's considered in good form for you?
I would
Like,
say
how many games?
3 out of 5.
Okay,
Meaning,
okay,
like, it depending on what sport you are, what sport you're looking at, but generally making sure they're, like I said, they might have a good record, but they might be like only won one out of their last 5. But I
gotcha.
but I don't. But now with that form, I actually put that form into the model, and I
Oh,
can I
okay.
can I can explain that real quickly. And this is what's great about stats. I could literally, I might make this a course, how to turn any stat into a line. It's super simple. So, for example, you say, well, how would you convert form into a line? Very easy. If a team's won 3 out of their last 5 games, that team would get 30 points. So
Mm,
if it was a money line, I put that in there. If they've won 1 out of 5, they would get 10 points. So you
gotcha.
could do it for anything. So for NBA, if a team's won 4 out of 5, I would give them 4 points, for example. If a team's won 1 out of the last 5, they would only get 1 point. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. So my philosophy now is I want to have anything that I deem important, I'm going to put it into the model. So that model, in the old days, I would say the model was 50%, and then situationally, I would handicap another 50%. Now it's probably 85% model, 15% situationally.
Got you. And I want to bring this up, man, because that Memphis and Virginia game, you had a back and forth with a guy on
Oh,
Twitter
I got
about that
killed.
game. So listen, this is the thing though. Your model, the line, I was believe it had Virginia by 13. Is that
It
am I
might have been
correct?
right. It probably did because yeah, it probably did.
And
I think it
so
did.
I'm trying to practice discipline and just like, hey man, we need to be able to track our results, but so we have to be stable in our mode of thinking. So just follow the model. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, I just don't believe that UVA is going to be able to keep up with Memphis offense. It just didn't make sense for me
And
that
that was
game.
what happened. You were right. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That's what
So
happened. And like I say, sometimes depending on how your model is structured, um, you'll just lose some. And so for me, I would never go against the model if I had. I think we actually had line movement in favor of Virginia. I can't remember, but
mhm,
I ended up playing that one. Um, yeah, sometimes you're going to take a loss. You're going to do everything right, but times and that loss didn't bother me at all because it, it, it's when I generally make a mistake in my handicapping, and then a lot of times if I make a mistake and I'm like I go against the model or do something dumb, that's when I'm extremely frustrated myself when I do that. So staying disciplined for me is, that's why it's important. However you do this business, even on a rec level, is having a process.
right.
Because then when you just go by gut instincts, I mean, a lot of times that's going to lose. And
Absolutely.
maybe like what you were saying, your model, like if you didn't have a model, somebody might look at that and say, "Hey, I just really believe Memphis." Virginia always has traditionally good. They play that pack line defense. Memphis is run and gun. You just said, "Hey, I think this offense, even though Virginia has a good defense, I just like what you said. That in itself is a model." You know what I mean?
Got you. Got you.
So for some guy that's watched enough basketball to have an opinion about it, that's one way to do it.
Right. Right. Well, let's stay on the topic of social media, man. What's your take on social media's hyper influence in the sports betting world right now?
It's crazy. Like that play there, it's you know, like everybody, like I had people commenting, that model's broken. I had people, that model sucks. I mean, that model right now is up. I could pull it up on phone. It's up 10 units, dude. It's at 50 cents. I'll pull it up right now and quote it. Like that model that had Virginia. I'll pull it up. It's it is 50 56 and 42. That's like 57% up 10.83 units. I mean, it's a good model. It
That's
just
a good
lost that
model.
game. Yeah, but what happens about social media, this is what I hate is it's just God, I can't believe it. Yeah, I'll say this I made a video that the majority of people that wager on sports are ignorant, and I don't I I don't think I've come to this conclusion that people I have to understand and realize people don't approach this like I do. Meaning like it literally is just something they enjoy doing. So if a guy puts a free play out there and it loses, like in their mind, that guy sucks. Like that's literally what they think. Like, hey, this
Right.
guy sucks. Like, I mean, and that comment there, I posted that on social because the day we won, not this past, yeah, this past weekend we won like 8 grand in a weekend. This one, it was like a huge weekend. That was 2 weekends ago. It
Yeah.
got like one like on social media.
It's
It's
crazy,
like,
man.
yeah, nobody cares. But that's what I'm saying. I think the majority of people, it's just like sports betting for the large majority. It's just so, and I'm not saying anything's wrong with that.
Right.
Meaning like people just socially bet. It's just fun to socially bet. It's fun to slam people, but you know, it bothers me. It bothers me a little bit because I don't think going back to the beginning of the show, like I don't think they understand what a successful bettor is. I mean, successful bettors are going to have losing days, losing weeks, might even have a losing month, but majority of their career they'll have they'll be able to win long term.
No, no, absolutely. I think there is a huge misunderstanding by the public of like what winning looks like when you're sports betting, especially when you're talking about doing it every single day. A lot of these people are casuals to the point. And again, I'm a rec guy, but I bet every single day. I have a wager out there every single day, and um, but there's this misconception that well, okay, if you post a pick and it loses, all right, no, you're not good. I can't follow what you say anymore. It's like, dude, this is a long-term strategy here, like,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've learned a lot, about that from you. And it's more so, it's not even when you make wagers, it's you're not always expecting that team to win, but you made the wager because it was a good value in the wager.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what people, you know, that's sort of when you start thinking that way. Now you're leaning towards the sharp side, meaning like when I make these wagers, it's not like I'm looking at, yep, Milwaukee's going to win tonight. I'm playing Milwaukee. It's never that. It's just I have to ask myself, is this a good wager? It's the same deal with somebody would like if somebody's looking for a house, and if you ever bought a house, you can relate to this. It's like more times than not, even in my life, you never buy the perfect house because you generally have like two or three that you like, and you're like, well, this one's got the big yard, but this other one, this is, I love that. You're gonna have to compromise, meaning like it's not gonna be you know, it's just not. You're gonna have to make some concessions. You're never picking. You just somehow based on a number of decisions. Hey, this is probably the best one. It's the same deal with sports betting. 100% Milwaukee's going to win. No, you just look at it, go, okay, well, we got value. Is this a good wager? That's a good wager, and that's whether it wins or loses, you have no control. You can't predict outcomes of these games. I've said that before, and I think people. That's when you get the mistake when you're trying to do that. When you're trying to pick a winner, it's just you're just going to end up losing the game. That's why you
Right.
need to just be focused and just, does it have value? Do you have situational angles in your favor based on how you handicap? And if it does, you just let it rip and you'll win some and lose some. You're just trying to win a little bit more than you lose.
Yeah, and you reposted a guy who claimed that he was 80%
Oh, yeah. It's like
the other day, man. Tell the audience like how outrageous that is.
you
And
just, you can't do it. There was a Sports Insights got bought out by Action Network, but that was the only odd service that I subscribed to back in the day it's an odd service where you can get odds in real time, but Action Network bought them out. So whoever on Sports Insights made crazy money. Sports Insight wrote some great articles back in the day. They did this thing called the Z ratio. It's basically a formula. Your odds of hitting 70% over 1,000 wagers, that's basically a full year.
Mhm.
So in a year's time, the odds of you hitting 70% is one in a trillion.
Wow.
One in a trillion hitting 70%. And it's just that's what I'm saying. Most people don't, and most people don't track their wagers. These rec
Yeah.
bettors, so anybody can say anything and they're going to believe it. But people don't. People just don't understand how difficult it is. And that's another flip side to me of how I teach. I've never been 55% in my career, even probably 54. It's always hovered around 50% because I play a lot of dogs. So if I play in a lot of dogs, I hit 50%. I
Right.
mean, I'll be profitable long term. I just think
Absolutely is.
that's easy. I think that's easier to do than playing a majority of favorites, majority of spread lines or minus 110 lines, and then trying to hit 54, 55%.
No, 100%. Your ROI essentially is better. Playing that way.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think a lot of people don't think about the ROI aspect of it. And inevitably, you can still win a lot and be losing at the end of the day too, because you're losing out money on those prices.
Yeah, absolutely. If you invested $30,000 in NBA and you're up 3 units, that's just 2 units. Probably not a good. You shouldn't be wagering on it
Right, right.
because
Doesn't
it's
make sense.
too much capital to put at risk. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
ROI is important.
what's your opinion on you know the the percentage of people who make betting content? Like, how many of those guys are actually sharp?
I would say it's. I don't think it's. I don't think that. I think that number's real small. Because
Yeah.
that guy that I watch, and I'm not slamming on the guy. I didn't mention his name, but he's a very good broadcaster. He's good at what he does, talking about sports. He sounds intelligent. But I mean, when I went and looked at his record, he was like way in. He was down like 20 something units last year. I mean, I've had losing seasons too, but I'm saying, more times than not, those guys, the content people are not winning sports bettors because generally, and this was on another podcast, and I thought this was an interesting statement. This sharp basically said, "Hey, if you don't have your record for the world to see that you're profitable long term, chances are you're not profitable long term. You're just not." So most of those people that if they don't have their record somewhere, their yearly record or a way to you to look at their wagers from a monitoring service, whether it's Action Network, Bet Stamp, whatever it is. I mean, chances are those guys don't win long term. And again, I'm not throwing shade on
No,
content
for
people
sure.
creating sports betting, because it has a place in the marketplace, But as far as like that, those guys being sharps, it's real. It's just not their gig.
Yeah. And so, with the uptick in legalization around the country, how do you see your business being impacted?
It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be huge. I think it is. And one thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to create more. I thought about doing this, just creating a lot of maybe some premium type courses
Hmm.
that go a lot more in depth. I thought about like even maybe selling, like making the stat model just an online course, sort of like a teach yourself kind of model. That seems crazy, but I've actually just having some stat model clients now realizing there's a lot of things that I sort of reteach to each new client that I could basically turn that into a course. But I think it's going to be huge. I think it'll be um, one positive that might come, and this will sound ludicrous when I say this, but I think that sports handicappers will be regulated in the future because it's going to happen to the sports book first because sports
Hmm.
books now, even though they're regulated technically, but I mean they can do what they want to do.
Right.
They can limit somebody, they
Yep.
can ban somebody, they can pay them late, whenever. But I think the government intervention with that is going to help. But I think, for example, I think handicappers in the future, you're gonna have to have a license. It's gonna cost $1,000. You'll have to pass a test, and then maybe even like mortgage people, where they put their little license number up in their Twitter profile. You might have to have one of those saying that you're, a legit handicapper. I mean, I don't know, but that sounds like it doesn't sound that far fetched to me
Sounds
because
plausible to me.
I mean, there's people coming out of the woodworks every day, putting up, buying fake followers, saying they're, hitting 80%, and then, taking people's money because people just aren't, again, if the market's uneducated and you have people that do this, then people are going to give that guy that's claiming 80% money and end up losing. And it's a lose lose for, well, it's a win win for the 80% guy. but still, it's just not ethically. It's just not good. That's one negative that's happening with the sports betting industry growing. But as far as the business, I mean, I mean, my business has grown like crazy amount here in the last 2 years because I, I
Awesome.
I I think there are people, and again, that's my. I think the business appeals to a lot of people. There's people that I have one client that's doing this on a professional level that was with me. Big shout out to Eric if he's listening. And then I think there's a lot of people. This is a funny story. There's a guy literally. He lives in Boston. He might be watching it. He signs up for NFL every year, and every year when he signs up, hey man, welcome back or whatever. And then he cancels once the season's over, and he literally just canceled a couple weeks ago. And we were chatting back and forth on Instagram. The first time when he joined, I remember I was trying to help him, and he was like, and I was trying to explain it. This was probably 3 years ago, and I was getting real in depth about things. He was like, dude, literally, I take your power rankings and look at them like 15 minutes before the game and make my wagers. I just want to have, I just want to have a little bit of edge. And so,
Right.
and so then what I've realized over the years, there's people that literally like I want people to watch all the videos, but in reality, people aren't going to do it. They just want to, what's the line? Okay,
Right.
Memphis is plus 6.5. The books have them at, okay, I'll play that one. I mean, a lot of people do it because it's just, there's a lot of people that are clients that just recreational use the power rankings. They have no desire to be a professional or, they just, they just feel a little bit more secure having that power ranking, that number in front of them. And they know it's the same model I use. So at least they have that confidence. It's not like I have one model and I'm giving the client. It's the same model. I mean, it's the same model I make all my plays from. But I
Right.
think there's a lot of people that, and I do think this is a good thing. Just like you're saying about there's people that put out a lot of content. They might not be as
Hmm.
sharp. There's a place for that. People want to consume that content. If people actually want to get better, they can do that. And even with the stat model, if somebody wants to take really learn how to build a model, that's something that I do as well that I enjoy doing. So it's like there's going to be a lot of money made in sports betting. That's probably a better way to say it. I mean, a
Yeah.
ton of money. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if Sports Insights got bought up by Action Network. I mean, hell, maybe they might buy my company out. Who knows? You never know. I mean, you don't.
Yeah.
I think the business is going to be. I mean, this show you're watching right now, it might be on ESPN two in 3 years. I mean,
Right.
that's what I'm saying. People, I don't think probably myself and no, I do believe it, but I don't think the large majority of people understand how big the sports betting industry is going to be. It's going to be huge. It's going to be
Absolutely.
huge. You
Yeah.
might
I'm
be able
I
to buy
agree.
a TV. Sports books are going to go to Samsung and they're going to put their sports book on the TV and you'll set an account and you'll be able to wager off the remote control on the TV
Yeah.
screen when it goes in. I
It's
mean,
going to be huge.
yeah, it's going to be huge. So if you're looking for a business to get into and just whatever you want to do, I mean, you get in now. I mean, this thing's going to be huge in 3-5 years because you're
So
going to have
so
more states to legalize it.
right. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up. So what advice would you give to someone looking to make a full-time career in sports betting?
Mm, that's another good one. Yeah, I think you have to you got to build the models. I've always been an advocate of that, but I think there's only a way. It's like being successful in anything. You can do what I did, which read all those Bob McCune books and learn that way. So I just think it would be hard to discover this on your own. Meaning like you could probably watch some YouTube videos and get better, but at some point you're going to have to find somebody that's where you want to be in life and
Right.
mirror them, follow them, mentor, be a let them
Just
be a
like you
mentor
would
to you.
any other skill enhancement.
Yeah, same thing, same exact thing, and then just grind away because it's a very difficult business. Very, very difficult. I mean, it's doable. You can do it, but I mean, it's hard. It's like
Right.
anything. It's like my oldest daughter's in nursing school. It's hard, you know. So it's not like it's not impossible. I mean, there's people that
Right.
don't make it through nursing school. There's people that do, you know. but it's just hard. And that's really it. And there's really no secret to this business. You just got to grind it out, build some models, and then once you get that first model and it's successful, then it makes it so much easier to build another one. And that's something I've grown a ton here in the last year and a half because I've redone the NBA model, I redid the NFL model, college basketball, college football stayed the same, NHL stayed the same. I'm working on a new golf model as well now.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And then
All right.
baseball's new. Baseball was new last year.
Okay. Nice. Nice. All right, man. Well, where can the audience find you?
MGCovers.com. And if you try to find me on social media, it's MG Covers, Covers spelled with a Z. And if you just Google MG Covers on YouTube, you'll find me there as well.
Perfect. Like I said, this guy's got a ton of content out there, very educational. If you're looking to enhance your results, and I mean, again, you can be a recreational guy. I am myself, and you will get a ton of value by just watching the videos. But I would highly recommend that you sign up for his services. You'll be a part of a community, and I mean, ton of information out there, and then have access to the power rankings and which inevitably comes from the stat models that he creates. So I've definitely loved the experience. And MG Coverz, man, I really appreciate you coming on. You got me feeling lucky.